Okay, I think we can start. The other people can join in while we're busy, because we only have an hour, of course. So today until 5 o'clock, we have the next DASH webinar on responsible development and implementation of AI, a very interesting and important topic. We will have Claudine Lamoth and Mirjam Plantinga giving their presentations to you. I will be moderating today. My name is Peter van Ooyen, and I'm part of DASH as the coordinator of the Machine Learning Lab. DASH is the Data Science Center in Health of the UMCG. For you that don't know DASH yet, a little introduction. We are a program where some people are involved. We're a small group of people. We are all located in other departments of the University Medical Center Groningen, but part of our time we spend in DASH, and there we try to elevate the level of data science, AI, e-health in the UMCG. And we do that by running projects, supporting projects, the machine learning lab, looking at the needs assessment, helping with funding opportunities, and one of the most important things, building the community that is working in this field within the UMCG, and trying to work on education and communication. And the webinars that you're looking at now is one of those things that is partly on education, of course, because we share information here, but it's also about building up the community and getting people together. So we hope to be able to also do these kind of meetings in real life again soon, but for now we still keep it as webinars. The webinars will be recorded, so if you want to watch it later on again or want to share it with colleagues that didn't have the chance to look at it in real life, then they can watch it later on through the YouTube channel of DASH, where you can also find all our previous webinars and other interesting content. So for today, I would like you all to mute your microphone. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. There's an icon of a little puppet with its hand raised, so you can raise your hand and then we can give you the floor. Or you can type your questions in the chat. Like I said, we will record this webinar. And today, as I said, we will have two presenters, Claudine Lamoth and Mirjam Plantinga. Claudine works at the Department of Human Movement Sciences and is General Scientific Director of SPRINT. Her research focuses on the movement analysis, smart technology and aging, with a particular focus on how innovations in the field of sensor technology and machine learning can be applied to support healthy lifestyles and healthy aging. And Mirjam has a background in economics, philosophy and sociology, and conducts research on responsible implementation of healthcare innovations, with a particular focus on innovations in the field of genetics and e-health innovations. And what we will be talking about today is the responsible development and implementation of AI, and that will be based partly in the ELSA lab of the ELSA AI lab, Northern Netherlands, where Mirjam will give a first presentation on now. We will have a short moment to be able to ask questions to Mirjam, and then we'll move on to the presentation of Claudine. So Mirjam, the screen is yours.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, so I would like to tell you a little bit about the ELSA lab Northern Netherlands, but before I do so, I would like to start with telling you a little bit about what responsible development and implementation is. So as Peter mentioned, I have, you could say, an ELSI background. And ELSI stands for ethical, legal and social issues, and sometimes different acronyms are added, like you see here right at the bottom. That's the logo of the ELSI research group in the Department of Genetics, where I'm working, and there I've conducted, you could say, research in responsible development of innovations in genetics for a few years, and we focus on ethical, economic, legal and psychosocial issues. I think, first of all, when we talk about responsible implementation, it's important to understand why this is such a challenge at the moment. And I think it is such a challenge due to the technological progress that for a while ago we didn't have a lot of data, and that is really changing a lot. As you see here in the left bar, I think it's really nicely shown that the data that is being generated currently is increasing enormously. So there is a lot of data, more and more data each year. It's well, quadrupling. Well, maybe the beta people here know all the abbreviations, but I think it's well, I lost count with all the data we have. And on the other hand, also it becomes more cheaper to get a hold of this data. And you see that here nicely at the right hand side. This is a little bit an older picture, but in the 1990s, for the first time, it was possible to sequence the whole human genome, and that took them 13 years and cost $3 billion. And at the moment, we can do that for less than a week for $1,000. So you see that this has a huge impact. Now we have the data, and the question is, how do we cope with this data? What is a responsible way forward? So that's really why these questions are so urgent at the moment. And then, of course, the question is, but what is responsible implementation? And I think the first take-home message is that there is simply no easy answer. There's no one answer to that. There are a lot of different frameworks. There is also, you could say, a scientific discipline, responsible research and innovation. And here you see some pictures of different frameworks with regard to the European guidelines for trustworthy AI. A lot of ethical principles are there. But I want to show here is that responsible implementation is, well, for one, multidisciplinary. You see there's always some ethics involved, but also something you need to incorporate users. Of course, you have to abide with the legal framework and the law. So it's very multidisciplinary, and there is no single answer, because it also depends on what you're going to implement and where. So that's the first message I would like to say. And second, I think that you could say, well, what is responsible implementation? At least you should address some of these ELSI or ELSA issues. And ELSA stands then usually for aspects instead of issues, but I think the terms can be mean the same thing. So. And there again, as I mentioned, ELSI stands for a lot of different acronyms. So ethical, economical, but also environmental, legal, psychosocial, socio-political. So there are a lot of different elements that could be thought of and that need to be thought of. And depending also on what field you're working in, what kind of innovations you're implementing, and where different aspects need maybe more consideration than others. So just to explain a few abbreviations. So with economical, the SROE, so it's the social return on investment, health technology assessment. So of course, that's an important aspect as well. You don't want to develop something that will never be able to develop into a business case. But of course, you also need to consider the legal sides. But also, that's also where we do a lot of research in, is this psychosocial side. So you want to know what the impact will be of the innovation. So you want to investigate attitudes, psychological impact. Are people able to make an informed choice? What does it mean on a societal level? Does the innovation lead to stigmatization or discrimination? How can we make sure that there's equal access to the innovation? So there are a lot of different aspects that need to be considered. And what is also very important is the involvement of the users, the patients and the public. What are their needs and preferences? And also they can provide, of course, a very important input for all the other ELSI aspects. So for the ethical issues, regarding to, for example, norms and values. They depend on the patient group or the public that is involved. And the involvement of the patient and public is, of course, very important for the implementation, for the requirements for the use of the technology, for the acceptability of technology, and first of all, for the fact that the innovation or the technology is the right solution for the problem that needs to be solved. Because very often something is being developed because we think, well, it's cool, we can develop a nice tool, but it's not always the solution that is the best solution for the problem that needs to be solved. So there are a lot of different things that need to be addressed. It's not possible to look at all these things within this short presentation. But what I wanted to do is to look at one aspect with regard to the ethical aspects of innovation. And I would like to do that by looking at a concrete case. Because ethics is about norms and values, about thinking about what is the right or good thing to do. And then I would like to present to you a case and also ask you to put in the chat, and Femke will put a poll in the chat, what you think is the right course of action here. This is a case, and I thought it's very interesting. It's based on a play, a German play that has been how do you say that, performed all over the world, I think even. I've been to this play in the Netherlands, so it was in the Netherlands, but also in different other European countries, and I think also abroad. I thought even also in the United States and in China. And the question that is at stake here is the question, is it morally justified to kill 146 persons to prevent the killing of 70,000 persons? And in the play, which is called Terror, it's up to the audience to judge whether the military pilot who killed 146 persons to prevent the killing of 70,000 is guilty or not. So that's the question also to you. So where is the story about? It's about a flight from Berlin to Munich, and the plane has been hijacked by terrorists, and they want to bring down the plane above the football stadium in Munich, in which 70,000 persons are present. And the military pilot receives the order to follow the plane and not to intervene. But the pilot decides just before the plane is about to hit the football stadium to shoot down the plane. And by doing that, he kills the 146 passengers aboard, but he saves the 70,000 stadium visitors. And the question is therefore, is this action of the military pilot morally justified? That's my question to you. I think I already saw a lot of people casting a vote. I don't see the answers now anymore. I think I clicked it away because I couldn't see. Yes, I see it again. Maybe we should give everyone a little bit more time to cast a vote. We, how do you say that, decided not to go for I don't know. So it would be really good just to make it to make a choice. Do you think it's morally justified or not? Okay, so it's interesting to see that most of you find it morally justified, and some of you don't. Well, we don't have too much time to go in detail. That maybe we could do that afterwards. But I think there might be different options possible. For the people who cast the vote yes, they probably have a focus on the consequences. They have what is called in ethics a consequentialism or utilitarianism approach. That means that you look at the consequences of the actions. And in this case, you could say, well, of course, you're not allowed to kill, but in doing that, you save 70,000 people, and they are far more than the 164. So that's probably could be one of the arguments for the people who have voted yes. For the people who voted no, it could be that they have a more of what is called in ethics deontological approach that is focused on principles. And yeah, of course, it's not morally justified to kill. And then from this principle, it said, well, it's no matter what the consequences are, it's simply not morally justified to do so. So also not in this case. And why do I show this example? It is to show that, especially when you look at ethics, there are no clear-cut answers. And what is the best way forward depends on your line of reasoning, which can be, can be based on different principles, and also depends on the context. So and moral reasoning requires, of course, reflecting on different possible conflicting norms also. Of course, we have the norms of beneficence and non-maleficence, so to do good and no harm. But there are a lot of different values that are at stake. So we want to promote autonomy, secure privacy, solidarity, equity, and they can be and often are conflicting to each other. And then choices need to be made. And also weighing of these different norms and values, they depend on the context. So for example, I thought it was very interesting that this case was also being provided in China, where I think overall the answers for this case were, I think, 60% who found it acceptable. So they reasoned more from this consequentialistic approach, and 40% didn't. Well, in China, it was a little bit different. There, it's the norm is higher that you do not go into you obey the rules. So there were more people who didn't find this action allowed. So I think it's really interesting. And that, of course, matters. It matters in which society you are, and depending on the society, different answers will be brought forward. And it also depends on the organization. If you're developing an innovation, then it might be that, of course, the rules within the UMCG, the fact that you're working in the healthcare sector, differs from when you're working at or implementing something in a direct consumer context. So that's what I meant with DTC, so more in a private context. So that's different. There are different, it's a different context, and that means that the right way forward could also be different. And also what is right for patient A can be different than what is right for patient B. So that differs as well. And also norms and values, they change over time. They are influenced by technological process, but also by economic and cultural changes. So I think that's just more important to realize. And therefore, moral reasoning cannot also be solved from the outside, but requires discussion with stakeholders. So it's very important that in the development of innovations and thinking about how to do that in a responsible way, that the different stakeholders are involved. They are the ones who are being need to work with the innovation or being impacted by the innovation. So what matters to them matters for the development in the innovation. So that's very, very, very shortly, very general about all the elements that are in stake and need to be considered in this process of responsible development and implementation. And I think that it's really, really great that the Dutch AI Coalition came up with the idea to set up ELSA labs because, of course, especially with regard to AI, it's very important that all these aspects are considered in the development of AI. So ELSA stands in this case for ethical, legal, and societal aspects. So especially with societal aspects, they meant that it's important that these ELSA labs work together with this, what is also a very fashionable term at the moment, quadruple helix partners, so that researchers work together with government, business, but also the public, so that societal partners are involved as well. And these ELSA labs should contribute to the development of human-centric AI. So it's in line with the European guidelines on trustworthy AI, and that they respect fundamental rights and public values. And you need all these quadruple helix partners together in order to be able to develop the knowledge and to create this learning process that is essential for this rapid developing technology that AI is. So the ELSA labs, they will develop the knowledge that's necessary for responsible development and implementation of AI. But the idea is that they also try to make steps in implementation of AI in practice. And that also results in the Netherlands being a front runner in this area. So this year, the beginning of this year, 5 ELSA labs have received funding, and at least for the coming 2 years, 10 more labs will receive funding as well. But the idea is that for the future years, probably there will be even more so. So I mentioned 20 here, but there will at least be funding for 10 more. And why is that so important, especially in the field of AI? There's just one example that I wanted to give. So as we all know, I think here, that AI is developing at a very fast pace, and it has high expectations. And also, I think in healthcare, it could offer a lot of good opportunities to contribute to high quality and affordable healthcare. But it also raises a lot of ELSA questions. And if one of these questions concerns bias, and I think most of you will know a little bit about it, but I think it's good to mention that there are two, or bias can be the result of 2 forms of bias. And the first of all is the bias, the cognitive bias that is essentially there within our society. So the bias that we already have towards certain groups. So there is bias with regard to gender, age, race, and weight bias, for example. And if one of these examples is the AI that was developed by Amazon to assist in the recruitment of new staff. And what they want is actually, they wanted to decrease bias, but what happened is that they made use of CVs of existing staff members, which were mostly male. So the AI algorithm, in the end, what they did is they just threw away all the female and only selected the male applicants. So in that sense, the bias that was already there, was of course also introduced in the AI, and then of course the outcomes were biased as well. And then the second form of bias is that's also sometimes called garbage in, garbage out. So it's very it depends, of course, on the data that goes into the algorithm and the way the AI system is trained. And we all know that it forms a huge challenge, because it's not always representative, and especially the data or the contribution of minority groups, so low socioeconomic status group, for example, is often much lower. So therefore, there is really a huge risk of bias. And also in healthcare, that means that the use of AI could even increase existing social inequities. And this is even more problematic because AI-based decisions, especially when they're based on machine learning and they are black boxes, they don't provide the opportunity that easily to provide an explanation for how the AI comes to a decision. And that lack of explanation, that's again an ELSA issue, you could say, because it conflicts with people's right to have an explanation for decisions that impact them. And this challenges, of course, responsible implementation of AI in decision making in healthcare. So this will be one of the aspects that we'll be looking at in our ELSA lab. So why is such an ELSA lab so important for the northern region? Here you see a map of the Netherlands, and while we were setting up our lab or our plans for the lab, we knew that there were already other ELSA labs who had received a label of the Dutch AI Coalition. So there were other ELSA labs that were being formed, and then we thought, well, it can't be that there is not such a lab in the Northern Netherlands. And also, we have in the Northern Netherlands a challenging socio-demographic composition, I think, as most of you know. So a composition of inhabitants which are older than average or characterized with more comorbidity, and we have more poverty and low SES inhabitants, which on the one hand is challenging, but also forms a very unique position to really study the impact for this group, or to see how we can take this group also along in this process. So that's what we want to do also. And furthermore, we are again very strong in the northern region with regard to health technology innovation. For years now, we are an EU reference site for innovation in healthy aging, and there is a strong focus on health technology innovation. So an ELSA lab would fit very well, and we have already the basis there for the technology expertise that you need for such an ELSA lab. So we were very grateful that we received this lab. Here you see the map again, and then the orange dots are the ELSA labs that have been received, and of course the blue dots hope to receive funding in the coming years, and there are more and more blue dots coming also. So, and it's important to know that our focus of our lab is on the implementation of AI in healthcare, but the other labs are on different issues. So it can be the use of AI in defense, for example. You see here a cultural AI lab, democracy, mobility, food industry. So it's very, very broad. But we focus on the application of AI in healthcare, and by doing so, we hope to promote healthy living, working, and aging. How do we want to do that? Well, we want to develop an online ELSA tool, and Claudine Lamoth will tell you a little bit more about that. And that is aimed to guide users through the process of developing and implementing AI. And also for the future, we would really like to function as a service desk for the Northern region, providing advice for responsible implementation of technological healthcare innovations. And yeah, we would like to build a network of ELSA expertise that could be used in the region. So how do we do that? So we will focus on 4 use cases. There's not enough time to focus on them in detail, but the synthetic data use case, that will be Peter van Ooyen is there, the one who's leading that. And so I think if you have questions about it, please contact Peter. Claudine Lamoth will tell you something about the monitoring data use case. Then we have a personal health data use case that is based on the use of data from personal health records. And that will be developed into an AI-based decision support tool that will be used in the process of shared decision making within oncology. And the people who are leading that are Lisette Items and Esther Metting. And then we have the genetic data use case, and that will be used in the interpretation of genetic data that is analyzed for the newborn screening. So that will be used in the lab, you could say, for the variant interpretation. And the leaders of that are Irene van Lange and Marjel van Gijn. So if you have questions about that, please approach them. And then we look at the use cases from a very broad multidisciplinary lens. So we look at cultural aspects, ethical, legal, social, political, and psychological aspects. So from different aspects, we will look at the use cases and try to investigate all the ELSA aspects that are there and how they should be handled in order to develop and implement these tools in a responsible way in these different decision-making contexts. And what we also will do is conduct stakeholder assessments, but because it's very important to get an understanding of how they approach these tools and to take them along in this development. And we will especially focus on investigating of views of professionals that are involved and patients and the public. And this is my I have another slide hereafter, but these are the work packages. I thought it was good just to let everyone know who are all the people involved, because of course such an ELSA lab is a very broad consortium with a lot of different people. So we have a participation work package which includes the cultural issues. So I'm leading it together with Anke Kouwmans from the Hanze University. The ethical issues are being done by Els Makelberger and Christophe Chedan. Legal issues by Marie-José Bondhuis and John Nisoud-Bonici. The psychological issues by Adelita Ranchour-Meyer-Schoevers. The socio-political issues by John Nisoud-Bonici, again with Ritumra Manouvri. The integration work package by Claudine Lamoth and Hilbrand Olderhuis. She will tell you a little bit about it later on. And the dissemination work package by Peter van Ooyen and Frank Schreur from the UMCG. And then we also work together with an international partner that's from the University of Oxford, Anneke Lucas and Lisa Ballard from the University of Southampton. So this is my last slide. This is our consortium. So it's a very large consortium with different knowledge institutions, international partners, patient and public organizations, societal partners, and business partners. And for the coming 5 years, we will be building an ELSA tool together. And hopefully we will come back once again to tell you a little bit more about the results that we are developing.
Okay, thank you, Mirjam. Very nice overview of the plans and ideas, but also some idea of the concepts that are behind the ELSA lab. Are there any questions in between now for this part of the presentations? If so, you can put it into the chat or you can raise your hand. I don't see any questions popping up. Well, you can still type them in during the presentation of Claudine, and we will handle them after her presentation then, because Mirjam will stay online, so she will be available also after the second presentation for answering questions if you have any. Okay, then we go on with the next presentation by Claudine Lamoth. So the screen is yours, Claudine.
Thank you, Peter. I will tell a little bit more about the ELSA aspects in a specific use case. And this as an example, and it shows that some of the ELSA issues are specific for the context and some of them are more generic. And the use case is the monitoring data case. It's a project that was recently funded by NWO, and it's called Healthy Living as a Service, realizing a sustainable and healthy society by improving lifestyle and social and living environment. I'll tell you first a little bit about the project. Healthy Living as a Service has an aim to facilitate long-term behavioral changes, which may result in healthy lifestyle or healthy lifestyles, and it will be supported by technology and artificial intelligence healthy living services. And in this project, we adopt a holistic approach, which implies that we not only look at separate domains of health, but we look at different health domains, how they interact, sleep, physical activity, but also we look at the person, how he or she interacts in his or her environment, and we take into account environmental and societal factors in an individual person's ecosystem. A focus of this project is also on inclusion of citizens with low socioeconomic status. Mirjam pointed already towards it with new innovations, health innovation, technology-based innovations, but also AI innovations. We see, in fact, that the gap between socioeconomic status groups increases, and that those who need to benefit, who have the benefits of it, are not always those who need it the most. Here also we have a multi-interdisciplinary consortium from citizens, researchers, artists, companies, and municipalities. And while I'm saying this, you may have noticed that some of these terms are bold in the text, and that's not by accident. When we wrote this text, this aims, it seems quite straightforward maybe, but when you look a little bit longer with an ELSA perspective on these sentences, you see that there are certain sentences and certain words in it, but has in fact quite some issues when you consider it from an ELSA viewpoint. Long-term behavioral changes, a healthy lifestyle, what is it? Is there one style? Artificial intelligence surfaces, how to deal with them, a person's ecosystem, we are measuring in the ecosystem of a person, what are the implications of that? And we talk about low socioeconomic status. And one of the things I notice when we talk about this difference in socioeconomic status, we always talk in terms of deficiencies of this group, of this low group. They have a shortage of knowledge, they have no access to, it's always in a negative way. Without appreciating their whole cultural values, for instance. And then we include citizens in our research. It's always nice to say that we do co-creation, co-participations, but do they have the same input and the same knowledge as researchers, artists, companies, municipalities? So just in these few sentences, you see already a lot of ELSA issues popping up. A little bit more about the project. To understand more, the aims is the project aims to have a result that implies that we have citizens of different socio-economic states that have ownership over their health by health technology and data literacy, healthy living and a social supportive motivating community, a monitor system with wearables, nearables, motivational feedback, coaching at different levels, supported all by an AI-based decision support system. And also here, I think you see the same factors back as I just mentioned in the previous slide. It will be a project in which we have field lab with citizens, with employees, with people in their own environment in the area of Uppingedam. We focus on co-creation, dialogue, low socioeconomic status, data literacy. We use wearables, nearables. There will be a platform developed, and of course algorithms and models, decision support system that gives feedback back to the user. And we combine it with behavior approaches and motivational approaches to improve healthy lifestyles. And if needed, a person can get advice about coaching and how to, for instance, improve their lifestyle. So this is basically the basic schedule of this project. But like I said, there are many issues from an ethical viewpoint. And of course, we say we apply legal and ethical boundaries associated with the use of AI technology in decision-making and intervention for health self-management. But what does this exactly mean and how can we do that? And that's what the tool, the ELSA tool, is about. The research in the ELSA North Netherlands will focus on developing and mapping ELSA knowledge around three general concepts: concept of availability, use, and performance. Availability is the creation of AI components and AI systems. For instance, good quality of data, garbage in, garbage out was already mentioned. So it's about the components, the AI components and the system components. The use is the interaction of the human with these AI systems, while the performance relate to the relation between the AI systems and the society as a whole and the impact of AI on a societal level. And the question is, if you use AI, are they in accordance with ethical guidelines for trustworthy human-centric AI? And again, here a specific focus will be on the prevention of adverse effects and bias in outcomes for low social economic status groups. So how will we develop such a tool? We have the different use case and we have these different items. And you could think about a stage gate type of development. And this is not exactly the stage gate we are aiming for, but it is just an example where you have these different areas of ELSA, availability, use, and performance coming back. But the first step, I think, and also Mirjam pointed it already out, is the idea, and also think about the question, is an AI solution indeed the best option? Do we need it? And is it the best one we can have? And this is also a value scoping phase. I think when you talk about an AI and the development of such a tool, it's very important to have these values open and explicit, because many of these values could be very simple at one, but it might be a trade-off between different values. For instance, it might be a trade-off among competing values such as, for instance, autonomy versus security, or anonymity versus trust. Moral values, a right to privacy, but also a right to, but also the sharing of data. So there is not one straight answer about what is good or what is bad. And an important question in such a tool is, how do you prioritize competing values, for instance? And how do you prioritize individual values versus, for instance, social, environmental values? So again, there is no straight answer. In the stage gate process, so you have to ask these questions, and before you can move on to the next development phase, let's say one of these three parts could be one development phase, you have to have answers found for your questions. And I'm asking you now, based on the short description of the use case about supporting healthy lifestyles based on wearables, nearable technology, and AI development, what are the questions you think are the most relevant, important questions if you consider availability, use, and performance? And you could put them in the chat, and then I'm very curious if you come up with the same type of questions that we have defined in our proposal as important ones. So take a few moments, minute, and just write down A for availability and your question, or just some keywords in the chat. And again, maybe to help you in availability, it's about data, the type of data, the reliability, the robustness of data. And in use is about the impact on the person of the AI. Informed consent. Okay, yeah, so that's what you need. Huh? That's not really a question, but that, of course, yeah, that's absolutely very important. You need informed consent. But if you talk about data availability, what would be a very important question to ask? I will help you a little bit then. It's the type of data. Yeah, indeed. What type of data? And there it comes. Yeah. Is it reliable? And what is reliable? Is it fair? Quality of data. Why will people, indeed, that's a very good question. I think, do we need this? That's really one thing. I think you should, at the front, you should ask yourself that. Reliability is a very important part. The type of data you're using, is it available? Will you have a lot of missing data is a very important one. And in the use, will people actually follow the instructions? Yeah. Protection, privacy. And it's interesting because you see already, I think, that these questions are not very specific for this use case. You can apply them to also the other use cases, indeed. Multiple sources of data, yeah, and how to deal with it. That's a very important one, especially in this project where you have data of wearables, nearables, data with not only different type, but different source. People have the choice to use them. Structured versus unstructured. Yeah. So I take you to the question we said, and you don't have to read the slide, it's very full, but indeed you can see many of the things you already mentioned were questions we put in the proposal and we recognize as being important. Indeed, how can data that's owned by the user be reliable, assessed and collected? And what are exactly the ethical requirements for sharing data? And can we share them? That can be about genetic, personal health data, for research with other researchers or with commercial partners. And indeed, what are the benefits for the user? Is there any benefit? And a very interesting one, I always think that we always say very easily that users are the owners of the data and are empowered. They have ownership of the data. We put it in every informed consent. Users have ownership, but in order to be empowered and have ownership and make a decision if you want to share it or not, you need at least to know what the meaning is of data. And we sometimes forget that for many people in normal society outside the university area, data is a very abstract thing. And if you say you have ownership and you can co-create or co-participate in developments, you at least need to have some ownership and some knowledge about the meaning of data. So also decisions about health, but all health-related inventions, do users accept it? And it's also what are the benefits for the users, but also if they have benefits, do they accept it? Do they trust it also? And indeed, is it ethical to sense that you ask the question, is this data that I want to use to inform my AI decision? I'm trying to see if is it ethical in the sense that you ask the question, is this data that I want to use to inform my, indeed. So do you have, for instance, cultural background? Yeah, very important. Is the data, can you use that? Yeah, but that can be very personal data, and there we come also about this bias. Is it ethical to use that in your decision support system? You may consider it from a research perspective important or for your model, but is it ethical? Can you just use all type of data you may need or want from a research perspective? That's a very good one. And also, what are the drivers for acceptability and what influence reliability and trustworthiness? And the requirements to make decisions as a user related to data ownership. And then also at performance level, if we give advice about healthy living, everyone has the right to live his life like he or she wishes. So if you're not following these guidelines, and if you choose to keep on smoking, or if you choose to do things that are considered not healthy, does it have any consequences? And especially, of course, in the employee-employer situation, this is a very important factor. And how to deal with this. What if someone is involved in get these wearables and nearables and feedback and coaching, but there is no improvement at all? So there are very many questions to ask from an ELSA perspective. And here someone also said, how will the algorithm know the difference between good and bad actors? Also a very important one to raise. So what we want to do in this ELSA Netherlands is create a toolbox, and based on the use cases we have, and this is an example of the healthy living, see what are the most important questions and how can you guide people to an answer given their question, their context, and the stakeholders also involved, because as you can see already, there is no yes or no question always possible. So Mirjam said it already, if you want to develop such a tool, you can use, of course, a stage gate approach. That's something you can use in the different development phases of your research or your project. But there exist many frameworks. And when I was involved in this proposal, I was looking for examples of toolboxes and was just searching on the website about what is available, what is there already, because we don't want to invent the wheel again. If there are good toolboxes already, we could use it maybe. And these are just 2 pages from one website, and there are many toolboxes. There are even toolboxes. Google themselves has toolboxes with ethical questions, and all commercial companies have toolboxes from very different perspectives. So yeah, that will be, I think, a hell of a job to make to find the right toolboxes that we can use knowledge of. But I think it's very important, and of course we have a certain focus of AI health-centered. Some questions when you start. What you also should address, and what is very important, I think, is who is responsible for what in every phase, and how you would deal with conflicting values, because again, values may be different, and depending on the context, I already mentioned, you have the balance between autonomy and security, for instance, and between the right to privacy, but also the need maybe to share data to improve your AI decision support system, to improve diagnostics for certain applications. We will integrate the knowledge obtained from all the work packages, and and try to complement existing tools and find the valuable components of already existing tools. And again, it is important to ask the right question at the right time when developing, and use a value-sensitive design approach. And I think it was the last slide, and I end with a take-home message from Mirjam and me. There's not one single way for responsible implementation. There are many different frameworks available, many different toolboxes also, practical toolboxes. And it depends a lot on the type of health technology, AI application, and societal challenges that are addressed. And you may need different frameworks also for different questions and for different challenges. And some are better suited for specific questions than others. But it's very important to include focus ELSI, ELSA questions from the start, and have an overview of all the different stakeholders, and also adopt a very multidisciplinary approach, and target group engagement is essential. And I thank you for your attention, and I think there's some time for questions, I hope.
Thank you very much, Claudine, for this very nice presentation. And I think you already got people thinking about these kind of issues, because we got a lot of people reacting in the chat already. We got a couple of minutes left to answer questions. So are there any questions? Please raise your hand or type them into the chat if you have any. While people are thinking about their questions, maybe I can ask one. If people that are now in the audience have a question concerning an ethical issue, can they already get to the ELSA lab? If so, how?
Yeah, shall I try to answer that, Peter? Yeah, a very good approach. So I think we are currently making a website, so then it will be more easy to contact us. But for now, I think if people have questions, yeah, please approach us. We must say that at the moment, the focus is really on getting. We received some funding, which is great, but for the funding, of course, you have to do also a job. So we have to focus on that as well. So there will maybe not be a lot of resources to invest in advice, but it's already important to know what advice is needed And also for the future, that's something really we want to develop. So if you have questions, please come to me or any other people. You can go to Dash and they will find me. So please do so. And then we will find a way to contact you with the people who can help you.
Yeah, thank you, Mirjam. Maybe the question that Frank put in is, of course, a question that follows basically on this. He says, what do you think? What's going to happen after the 5-year period where you have the funding for now? Will it maintain? Will it still be there? Will we still have an ELSA lab, and will it be expanding, or what are your ideas about it?
Yeah, so we have funding from the NWO for 5 years, and yeah, of course, if we want to have another funding, then we have to look for the means. But in the meantime, there is so much going on in our region. I think also now with the plans with health impact, the North Netherlands, we have now the Dutch AI hub in the Northern Netherlands who also received a lot of funding. So we just have to find a way to all work together and set up an ELSA lab as a, how do you say that? A fixed element of the infrastructure in the Northern Netherlands. And I think a lot of people really see that this is needed. And I'm quite confident that we'll find a way in the coming years to really get that done. So that's really our intention indeed.
Okay.
And with regard to the question from Bart, maybe as a final means, will you address the ELSA framework from the perspective of the private industry? Well, maybe Claudine can say something about it as well, but for sure we will take that into consideration. But Claudine, you have a lot of contacts with these partners.
Yeah, I think it's very important to do that, because also when you talk about things of data sharing with private companies, and also and often in many projects, the private industry is also one of the collaborating partners. So I think that you should have them also in the beginning as one of the stakeholders and take their perspective also into account. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I see that some people are already going to send you an email. One question from Pepijn is if the Aletta Jacobs or the Antina Thomas School are also part of the ELSA lab. How is the university involved? Maybe that's the final question.
Yes, so Aletta Jacobs is involved, and also what we want to do with the use case is also link with the population health data now. And I indeed also heard about the AI Antina Thomas School, which is really great. So I think that would be really great to involve that as well. And also in relation to the remark of Michiel, yeah, it's this coordination and indeed is very important. So there is a lot of going on in the Northern Netherlands, and I think indeed we have to work together and try to see how we can combine all these activities in a smart way. And that's for sure something that we try to do. In that sense, it's great. Also, I think that Dash is an important player in this field who is involved in all these different activities. So I think that's good that there is such a how do you see that? A strong position of Dash in all these activities. So I think they can fulfill a role in that as well.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, Mirjam, for that final note. I think with that, we're going to close this session because it's past 5 o'clock. So thanks again, Claudine and Mirjam, for your presentations here. Thanks to the audience for attending this session. We had over 30 people attending, so it was quite a good group. Spread the word, tell people that they can get the information also still through our social media sources. So if you want to know how to get there, contact us. dash@umcg.nl is the easiest way to get in contact, and then it will be sent to the right person. So thank you all for joining, and see you next time.